All right, well, first of all, congratulations to you. I'm
Thank
a big
you.
nerd about filmmaking. I love 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter in digital. You shot that 84, 88, 98.
Yeah.
Talk about the decision there, obviously, and what it felt like to go back to a 16 millimeter camera. Like, what was that feeling for you, the decision?
It's amazing because you kind of like, it's short takes and there's kind of hairs in the gate. I've forgotten all about hairs in the gate, that you finish a take, then the cameraman looks at it and goes, no, there's a huge hair. You have to do the whole thing again. It's like ruined. And it's kind of, and it gave a kind of, it's like a homemade quality to him in 1984. And it's punkish and like, he thought of himself as a pirate, as a rebel. And it felt like that for that, you know? It's like, it's amazing. And if you try and blow anything up, like if you try and go in on a scene, it's just murky. It's like, there's no detail there. It's bizarre the way we've changed. So then we moved to 35 for the middle section, which is what, because we used to call that the subterranean river of intention. Something's going on that you don't quite know what it is, but there's something weaving through, and the liquid nature of film, 35 film, is beautiful for that, and the reds and the golds, and it feels like colour noir in a way, and indulgent, and some things. Anyway, and you've eventually realised it's an act of revenge, which is a wonderful kind of discovery. And then you move to where Jobs was aiming all the time anyway.
The Alexa.
The Alexa and the digital possibilities and infinity and beyond, as somebody else said. So and suddenly there's nowhere to hide, which is why it's appropriate for that, because you can see everything. Everything's clear. And so what is there to deal with? And of course he's got everything to deal with, really, because the success has arrived. What else is there? And then he has to deal with the personal stuff.
One of the things that blew my mind the most about going back to your filmography was when you shot Slumdog Millionaire, you couldn't shoot motion film in certain parts of India. So you mentioned that you used a 4K still camera and got still images to put together.
Yes.
Were there any happy accidents like that on this set that you ran into, that you had to come up with another plan to shoot it?
Oh, the biggest one was the crowd days, because we didn't have money. We didn't have money to shoot. The theatres that the film happens in, there's 3,000 seats in it, and we could afford maybe 200, 300 extras, you know, financially. So we advertised on the internet for people who were at the original launches or people who'd like to come along, and we said, please dress up as 84 and 88 and 98. People did. I mean, they turned up in the most extraordinary gear. And it's so, and you don't see very much of it in the film, but their energy is there. Because it's evangelical, of course, the San Francisco town, what they owe him, in a way, their remembrance of him, although it'll be variable, you know, because of his reputation and the way he behaved towards some people, it's still pretty all-embracing. And they turned up, and they gave us these days, and we just shot on everything, because we didn't realise we would get that many turning up. So we shot on every camera we had, and we used the same digital cameras as well to create images and within that. So yeah, it was a, and we used every format we could on those days, because we just had every camera out to try and capture their energy, really. So that was the biggest thing, yeah.
Now you have some of the greatest films ever. I mean, Train Spotting, 20 Days Later. You're looking back at something like Train Spotting and the filmmaker you were at that point. I mean, the toilet scene is one of the greatest shots in the history of movies. What did you learn on that set that you still utilized today in Steve Jobs?
Oh, it's actors, really. I mean, you kind of, you know, I mean, I love people who love directing, and you clearly love filmmaking.
Yeah, I do.
And I love that. And you meet people like that in the street. Not many people come up to you and recognize you and stuff like that. And they're usually people who love filmmaking. And it's great, and we're a team. We appreciate the same things. The vast majority of people, it's just about the actors. And you're there to get the actors the best they've ever been, if you can achieve that. Because that's what people want to lose themselves in, is acting. And so it's the same thing, and it's the same on Trainspotting, it's the same on this. You get great acting, and you're 95.7% of the way there, you know?
One geeky question before they wrap me up. How'd you get the toilet shot? How did you do that shot? Like,
what, in
the toilet in Trainspotting? How'd you get it?
It's an old theatre trick. It's a trompe-l'oeil effect. So you cut a toilet in half, and you put it that way, like that. And if you put the camera in the right place, you can't see the other half of the toilet. So what you have in the other half of the toilet is a slide, like a kid's slide, you know, on a playground?
Yeah.
So he goes in and he just slips down the slide. That's the way you do it. And then you have a guy chucking water up and stuff like that. It's like,
best scenes.
now I've told you, now I've spoiled it.
Best scenes ever, man. Danny, thank you so much. It's an honor.
Kevin, thanks so much.
This is your masterpiece.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much.
I really mean that. The fix-it moment for me was beyond devastating.
Oh,
Devastating.
yes!
Yeah, congratulations to you, by the way.
That moment, though, are we rolling? So that moment that you're talking about,
The fix-it moment.
the fix-it moment in Act 3, when I first read the script, I was sitting in a tiny motel room just outside of Melbourne, Australia, filming a different film. And I read that scene and I actually said out loud to the room, oh no, I can't do that. Oh no, oh my God, I can't do that. Oh my God, how am I going to... That's completely impossible. No one can act that. I mean, and I was dreading it until the moment that it came. And actually, that whole day, I think I felt sick. And when I think about the scene, I still feel slightly sick that I may have screwed it up in some way.
No, it's
it was such a
devastating.
terrifying scene to do.
It was devastating for me as an
Good.
audience member.
Oh,
Now,
good.
you memorize a ton of dialogue. Sorkin's one of the greatest writers of all time, and I was reading somewhere that you still remember quite a bit of the lines because you memorized so much of it.
Yeah.
Are there lines from earlier films that you still remember? Like, do you still know lines from like Titanic? Do you
Yeah.
still like which ones do you still remember?
Well, Sense and Sensibility, I can remember saying, Eleanor, where is your heart? Heavenly Creatures, I remember saying, I remember sitting in that bathtub and saying, talking about the murder, yes, it would be a wonderful idea to murder Mother. I remember saying that very clearly. But Steve Jobs, I mean, whole sections of it. You know, I'm the one who has to explain you to people. God forbid the angles be 90.1 instead of 90. I mean, if we had to go and do Act 1 right now in a department store, honestly, we could do it. It wasn't that long ago. We only wrapped in April. It's September.
Let's go do it together in a department store.
Good luck.
What's the department store here
Good
we can
luck.
go to in London?
Keep up, dude.
Let's do it. You know, you've had some of the greatest accents in the history of movies. I was looking back. I mean, American accent in Titanic, Revolutionary Road, Romance and Cigarettes, Northern British, Dressmaker, Australian, Reader, German. Here you're doing Polish, Armenian, bunch of different types of accents. Which one of those was the hardest accent you've ever had to conquer? And do you stay in the accent during the production? Like, do you call your family in the accent?
No, I don't. I love you for asking me this question because, first of all, I really enjoy doing dialects. I get a real kick out of it. And actually, I find it really helpful just accessing the character because you sort of can't, it's almost harder just doing plain old English, which I almost never do anymore. But this was the hardest dialect I've ever done because Joanna Hoffman, in reality, was born in Poland, moved to Armenia. Some of her family spoke Russian. She went back to Poland, then finally came to America as a teenager. So the thing that I didn't want to do was to, first of all, make the accent too thick and kind of obvious. But the other thing as well is that, you know, the rhythms, when you do an accent like that, you can make it can come across as being quite staccato. So if I was talking to you and I would say this, it can sound like that. Whereas actually, Joanna had been in America for a very long time. And so there were these rhythms that she had that really lent into all of this language. And that for me was the hardest thing. Really, of all of it, was getting the rhythms right. Because if the sounds were off, if the rhythm was there, somehow I felt I was in the right ballpark. But it was all really quite terrifying, I have to say.
Now, I was absolutely geeking out that he shot 16 millimeter for 84, 35 for 88, and digital for 98. That blew my freaking mind.
I was
learning
thrilled because Act 1 and Act 2, I look marvelous. Act 3, I look like a dog.
No, you look amazing. And I want to ask you, shooting a movie linearly, which is insanely
Oh,
unheard
it was
of.
so gorgeous. It was so gorgeous. That thing of like, okay, check the gate. When do we check the gate anymore? I mean, it was just fantastic. It was just amazing. And having to change reels and, you know, good old fashioned, you know, it was really special. And also there is a different quality. There really is a different quality to the film because of the way that it looks. And it does take you back. It takes you back to that time. And that's all Danny. That was all Danny's idea. Absolutely Danny's visual take on it. And, you know, the other thing that Danny did too for all of us that was so wonderful was 100% included all the actors in every decision that was made about how we were going to stage these scenes. And Aaron Sorkin wrote this 170-page script, but what he doesn't do is he doesn't force ideas on his director. So there's no real stage directions, or he doesn't really say, you know, and they walk into the elevator and they come back out again. He doesn't say any of that. That was all Danny, and that was all figured out in the rehearsal room. You know, Michael and I would do entire scenes just sitting on a carpet across from each other, or we would do them without stopping. You know, I mean, it was a very, very experimental process, and then we would figure out what didn't work so that when we walked onto the film set, we at least knew like the three things that really lent themselves well to the scene. But it took Danny to allow us to do that. You know, he never told us what to do, which is I think a sign of a really remarkable director.
Boyle plays the orchestra.
He does, yeah, he does.
It's an absolute honor to meet you. Thank you so much
God,
for the
how
interview.
amazing that you've only just seen it.
And one of the best scenes in the film is the moment you're like, what do you do? And the idea of, like, he says, I played the orchestra, which I think was a brilliant line. You think of Danny Boyle, he's the conductor of the film. He plays the orchestra when making a film like this. So I'm wondering, as an actor, where do you think actors fit in the orchestra?
I think they're an important part of the team, but when I'm just acting in a movie, I really see myself as just a part of the crew, essentially, honestly. I don't think... I don't view myself as any more important than the cinematographer or the key or the grips or or anyone else. I try just as hard. I try not to put what I do above what they do. I try to accommodate their needs at times with what I'm doing. If they ask me to, I'm very open to doing that because, again, it's a team effort, and I know when I'm in charge of the team, I really want everyone to just see themselves as a part of the team. And so when I'm a part of the team, I want to do the same thing.
I love the 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter. I want to ask you, as an actor, when you work in that format, is it different for you whatsoever? Because, I mean, are you aware that obviously you're aware the films happen, but is it different for you?
No, not at all. For me, it's just I'm into filmmaking, so I think it's interesting. But some actors don't care at all about that stuff, and if you were that type of actor, it would not affect your performance in any way, shape, or form. But it's cool, and I would just like to, I spent tons of time just talking to Danny and picking his brain just about how he was shooting the movie and why he was doing what he was doing, just because, just having access to his knowledge to me was one of the most exciting parts about working on the movie.
Yeah. Did you geek out though when you saw the camera, like the 16 millimeter camera? Did you go look at it and you mentioned the editing room? I'd be
yeah,
now.
Well, it's what we started on. Undeclared was shot on Super 16, and then the first few movies we did were on 35, and yeah, I like it. It's again, it's not good for improvisation because we do really long takes sometimes, which you just can't do on film. But I love how it looks, and I shoot with cameras a lot, and I have a lot of film cameras, so I like how it looks personally.
And one of the things I loved about the movie was your mannerisms. There was this shot I was looking at specifically where you're holding your hand a certain way, and I was wondering, should you talk about that and finding that mannerism?
It was something that I wasn't sure how much Danny wanted me to do or didn't want me to do. It's something I did notice that the actual Steve Wozniak does a lot, and when he's explaining things, I think it's because he's an engineer. It's I think he's literally imagining doing the things that he's describing. And so, yeah, it was again, one of those things that I was like, it's something that I've noticed he does. I can do it if you want. I cannot do it if you don't want. And Danny seemed to want me to do it. So I was more than happy to do it. But it wasn't like a very important thing to me. It was something I was more than happy to try to do. But if he thought it helped the movie. But it wasn't like, he does this, so I'm going to do this. If Danny was like, don't do it, I would have been more than happy to not do it.
Will you have a chance to sit in a theater and watch it with Wozniak?
I have sat in a theater and watched it with Wozniak.
Tell me how that went. Were you sitting right next to him?
I was sitting a few seats away from him. It was in a full it was at the Telluride Film Festival a few weeks ago. It was cool. He loved it, thank God. He had seen it already, and so had I. So we'd both seen it already, so I knew he probably wouldn't be there had he not liked it the first time he saw it, and I already liked it. So he really liked it. Then I had dinner with him after, and so we were able to talk about it for several hours. It was amazing. I mean, to me, the interesting thing he said was he's like that's what it felt like to be in a room with Steve Jobs. He's like, it's a very good representation of. He's like, not all this stuff happened, but he's like, as far as a visceral experience goes, he's like, that is what it was like.
Did he pick apart things about your performance at all? Did he say you did this 100% right? Like this was different? Like did he?
No, it was more just an overall kind of. Again, he knows that we weren't kind of going after, but he said just overall it felt like being with him, which is kind of horrifying in a way.
I love the idea of obviously you're dealing with elements of fiction and nonfiction. You're kind of like building a character on your own from real life material. And thought it'd be interesting if you were to write a fictional sequence between Zuckerberg and Jobs. Like, what do you think they would talk about if you were to write a scene with those two meeting together?
It's an interesting idea, and I hadn't given it any thought, but there is a similarity between Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. I think this is. I have no training in psychology at all, so this is a layman's take. I think that Mark Zuckerberg invented Facebook for himself. I think he had to. I think that he was so uncomfortable talking to people, and especially when he was 19 years old, talking to girls, that he invented this way to be able to put the best of him out there from the comfort of the seclusion of his own dorm room, and with this thing that he was very comfortable with, his laptop. Similarly, Steve Jobs felt that he was so deeply flawed, or as he puts it in the movie, poorly made, that he's unworthy of being loved or liked. But if he can make a product that isn't just useful, that doesn't just sell, but that people will love it and like it, that would stand in for him, and that in both cases, if you got in their way of making this thing that was perfect, they'd cut you to ribbons.
Jobs would bring out the best in people. He would force
Yes.
them, essentially kind of threaten people at times, as you mentioned in the film, to bring out the best and kind of push them to their limits. And at times people would bring him things and they would send him back 3, 4, 5, 6 times before they were perfect. Hypothetically speaking, like if Jobs were to get a copy of this script, if he could have seen it, do you think he would have sent it back a couple times?
Without question, because those first 3 times that he sent it back, he never even looked at it. You'd give it to him, and the day later he'd say, "It's not good enough. Work at it." He never even looked at it. He just knew that you hadn't yet done your best. So he'd certainly send this back. But I also think that if this movie weren't about him, if he were still alive and the movie weren't about him, if it were about Bill Gates, I like to think he'd like it. That just its tone, its style would suit him somehow.
Now, as you write something this beautiful, this musical, like the dialogue feels like it's musically done. I love that. Do you write to music ever? Like, is there an element where you listen to music as you're writing? It's like a beat?
I'm not listening to music while I'm doing the actual writing. I'm listening to music all the other time. Driving in my car, I'm listening to music and thinking about the scene that I'm about to write. But I'd love to be able to write music, and since I can't, I write dialogue. And dialogue, my parents started taking me to see plays ever since I was little, and oftentimes I was too young to understand, or too dumb to understand what was going on the stage. But I loved the sound of dialogue. It sounded like music to me, and I wanted to recreate that. It would grow and grow until I'd start to listen to symphonies, real symphonies, and kind of pick apart, okay, here's the allegro, and here's the adagio, and now here's the trio and the duet. If it's, so it's a rock opera, here's the drum solo, that kind of thing. And I try to lay these pieces out like it is a long piece of music.
This might be a completely ridiculous question, but I was just thinking about this because you've had some great roles in your career, different roles. You look at Dumb and Dumber, you look at something like this, Newsroom. Could you imagine an Aaron Sorkin Dumb and Dumber script, like how that dialogue would be so different if Harry and Lloyd were speaking in Sorkin language?
Wow. That amount of verbiage, first of all, would blow both of their minds up. And then to actually speak at that speed, smoke would come out of their ears. Talk about an engine overheating. Yeah, but I would love to see Aaron try it. Oh.
Someone get this done. So can we get the Farley Brothers on the phone and get this made.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your character from the
That'd be a hell of a pitch. Aaron, I got a pitch for you.
Yeah.
Hear me out. Yeah.
Please do it.
No.
Obviously, you've spoken Aaron Sorkin's language before and the dialogue before. And in this movie, there's a particular battle sequence that I just mentioned to you as you're battling with Fassbender. It's cutting back to the firing element in the second act. As you're doing that scene, does it feel like you're fighting a war? Does it feel like you're shooting guns? It feels like a battle sequence as you're watching.
Yeah, battlefield guns, heavyweight fight more. A lot of what you do with Aaron is the ping pong or tennis. You know, it's back and forth. It's act react, and he writes to that. And you can, if you use the other person like we did so often in Newsroom, that's great. So it feels like ping pong tennis. But that scene with Michael was a heavyweight fight, but it was a dance. It was a dance because you'd get to the end of a take, and then I'd go, I was late on that thing. He goes, yeah, but I'll be early on that other. I said, okay, great. So then we go right. So you're doing it together. And then when I saw it cut with what Danny did, and it was all this just marriage of this really, it's a great sequence, great sequence.
You know, I want to ask you because the movie was shot linearly, and in the sense of a shot in order, obviously, you know that. But when you're doing a scene like that, it's cutting back to the boardroom scene with the firing sequence. When was that shot? Was that shot linearly as well? Was that shot?
No, that was probably that was different. The restaurant scene that we have it was early, but you know. The big present day scenes, we're in those rooms at the launches, that was in order.
The 1635 digital stuff was blowing my mind. I was geeking out about that. I mean, like the 16mm cameras.
I'd forgotten. Danny says, the first part's going to be 16mm. I said, yeah, okay, great. And then I'm watching, and I'm going, what's wrong with the film? What happened? Why is this? It's 16mm. That's what it is, people. 16mm. Yeah.
Now, you've spoken some of the greatest dialogue from the greatest writers of all time. Sorkin, Coen brothers. Talk about the difference in delivering Coen brothers dialogue versus delivering Sorkin's dialogue, and like how you find, what's the difference in the delivery?
I worked with the Coen brothers on a film called A Serious Man, and the dialogue in that film was, the subject matter was somewhat plaintive and searching, whereas the energy of this particular movie was, and I find often with a lot of Aaron's dialogue is it's quite muscular and perhaps Shakespearean in its use of rhythm and wit and intellect. One of the similarities that they have is the specificity that they apply to the stories that they're telling, their use of a comma or ellipses, or everything on the page is meant to be there, and they ask you to adhere to that. And I take that seriously, and I love language. I love language theater as well as film, and it really gives you an opportunity to challenge yourself, to find your way into what it is they're asking you to do, as opposed to necessarily swimming around a little bit and feeling it out, or improvisation. It's how do I find myself into the mind of the person who's speaking these words in this order, with this moment here, with this pause here, with an elongation, whatever it is. Why do they choose to speak this way? I love to ask those questions. And I love that about what the Coens do and what Aaron does.